I made a conscious decision that I wanted to be a diplomat, and I made that decision when I was 14 or 15 years old. It was in my first year, my freshman year of high school. And I made that decision because I had sat down in class and we were doing some like career thinking thing. I don't remember the exact specifics of it, but the idea was think about what you want to do with yourself. I thought, well, I want to be a competitive worker. I
Okay.
am good at a few things. The thing that I am head and shoulders above other people good at is Japanese. Um,
Okay.
because of like all of that stuff I talked about previously with like the
Hmm.
exchanges, I,
Yeah.
um, I speak the language.
Hello and welcome. Welcome to my channel, Say Something with Mads, where week after week we have young change makers, youth, Gen Z coming on this channel and having some enlightening and very interesting conversations which are meaningful as well as entertaining. And I have to thank my audience for stepping, for listening to them and encouraging this channel. Thank you once again. Today, I'm very excited. We have a person, a young change maker. He will speak about a lot from his Japanese and American perspective. He will talk about his journey from his childhood to now. He's a change maker and he's an aspiring diplomat. Am I right? Let's welcome Tommy Meyer. He's joining me from Japan. Hi, Tommy. How are you doing?
Doing great, Madhumita. Thank you so much for the introduction, and I hope you guys are all doing well as well. I'm so excited to be here with you guys today.
Thank you so much. So, before I get into today's topic, where he wants to address how to bring youth into the social service sector, how to connect youth from Japan and Africa, and he is doing a lot in the cultural sector also. So, I wanted to ask Tommy to tell us about his childhood. So, it's very interesting. He has been in two different countries and he has been back and forth from US to Japan. So what kind of childhood you had? Tell us about your school, about your college, about living with your uncle and aunt during holidays. Take us through that beautiful journey from childhood till now.
Yeah, thank you. So I am half Japanese. To start off, that's going to be very important to this little section, and that's been really, really influential in my childhood and my growing up until now as an adult. It has informed a lot of like my values. Related to that, I spent most of my almost all of my schooling experience from first through 12th grade, so 12 whole years, in a Japanese immersion program. I spent my grade school studying half in English, half in Japanese. And so what that meant was it was not just this language that we were studying, it was like mathematics and history and social studies and everything else that an elementary school person studies in Japanese, not just the
Hmm.
language itself. And that was like very influential for me, as well as all of my peers, all of whom are doing great and amazing things right now. But as we moved up in grade levels, that amount went down over time, but it also brought with it a lot of really cool opportunities, such as exchange programs to Japan. So I've been to Japan twice just through my school alone, outside of all my family connections, which I'm going to get to in a second. But the first one was when I was, 14 years old, and the second one was
Okay.
when I was 16 years old. So
Tommy, I have to ask you this one from a very layman perspective is how is it very common for people of mixed origin to get into such schools, or people, most of the mixed races will go to such schools where you went, or it's specifically because your parents, your mom, dad wanted you to have culture both at the very young age? How you would see a normal youth, like do you see people going to only English schools, only American schools? I mean to say, yeah.
that's a great question. I think it really depends on where you live, first off, and like what's available to you. Like if you live in super rural, I don't know, Kansas or whatever, right? And you've got like maybe like several thousand people in your town, you're not going to have the same access, right, to programs like the one that I went through. So I'm very, very fortunate in that regard. Um, the program I went through is pretty special in its own right. And so while there are similar immersion programs, both like in my city and in other cities as well, there's this like chain of schools called like international schools that are designed for international families, either being their long term or short term, and they teach a variety of different languages. There's one in Portland, which is where I'm from, Portland, Oregon. There's an international school that does teach Japanese as well, so that was an option.
Right.
But again, I think it depends a lot on like how mixed you are. For example, like my mom was the one who immigrated to the States. If I was
Mm.
like a fourth or fifth generation Japanese person, I don't think I would probably
Yeah,
be
correct.
as pushed to. And I knew
Mm.
plenty of people, even like other Japanese people,
Right.
who like had chosen to go to like English only
Mm.
schools.
Mm.
So I would say it's a
Right.
variety of different factors.
Also, when you look at now that you are in Japan and you work with youth, do you think Japanese youth are still they are have their roots, like they learn their language and they are very well versed in speaking and writing Japanese language, which is very difficult nowadays in India? Why I'm asking is Indian youth will know to write in English and perfectly speak everything, but they are forgetting their mother
Hmm.
tongue, Hindi. They are getting moving away from that, and that's very worrying. They can't even read the literature, such rich literature we have. They can't even relate to anything, any good poems, any good stories. They're moving away from it. What do you feel, because you work for culturally integrating youth? What do you see in Japanese youth? Are they embracing these things or are they moving away?
So overall, Japan is rather unique in terms of countries as far as like the racial makeup of the country itself goes, or like the ethnic, both. But Japan is, last I checked, I think, and you probably wouldn't want to quote me on this, but it's like 92 or 94% Japanese, last I checked, which is like super huge, right? Like, especially coming from the US, which is very, very mixed, and has a lot of different diverse races, and that's its own separate conversation, right? But um, what that means for Japan is that the influence of Japanese language is still very, very strong.
Okay.
English actually was not even mandatory to take past, I believe, elementary school or something until rather recently, like within the last 20 years. And it's been kind of slow to catch on. Right now, I'm pretty sure students are required to take English from first to 12th grade,
Mm-hmm.
but there's also like there's very much limitations on the
Okay.
teaching that I've seen, and that's again to be expected. Like there's nothing wrong with that, but
Mm.
I would say that Japanese students view English more as
A foreign
it's this
language.
hard language, and
Mm.
it's to get me through school, unless they want to like go overseas, which there are some people who do, and they usually
Mm.
tend to give it a little bit more of a effort than the other. I also have a fun fact about English and Japanese is that because like based on the ways that the languages are created and made up, like the grammatical structure and yada yada, they no, it's like the hardest. Like if you speak Japanese natively, English is one of, if not the hardest language to learn, and then vice versa.
Okay. Too much, like
Yes,
totally different. There is, I mean,
right.
the grammar, the gender, everything, right?
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Like they're just so different that it's like from a, and this is like direct information from a linguist that I know. Um, So
So,
it's, I don't know. I think it's not quite a fair hand dealt to the Japanese students. I definitely get why they don't quite latch onto it.
you also said that you are teaching English to Japanese students. You are going to schools and taking sessions. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, that is correct. I don't do it maybe quite as often as you think. I work with an organization called JAC. That's JAAC. It stands for the Japanese American Academic Center. And what they
Okay.
do is they pick out little, well, not little. They pick out university students from across Japan who are
Okay,
international
got it.
students, and
Hmm.
then they like send them to various different schools that they contract with to teach in
Right.
English. But
Hmm.
we teach subjects in English. So like
Hmm.
last time I taught about opportunity cost, like this economic thing
Hmm.
and decision making.
Tommy, tell me about when you talk about the fact that when you're applying for colleges, it didn't go according to what you have planned, and that was a big disappointment for you. I think many people, young people, go through this. My own son is going through writing, and he has a top colleges. What if you don't get to the top colleges? You have to be mentally prepared that you may not be there, you may not get there. So, what will you suggest to them? And what was your journey of applying and not getting to your desired college, and where you are now, 1.5 year later, when you look yourself where you are? What was that like?
Yeah, that is a very good question. I applied to 10 different colleges in the US and
Okay.
one in Japan when I was a senior in high school. This was like almost 3 years ago.
Okay.
And I had a clear top choice. I knew at that point that I wanted to be a diplomat. And so that means that I wanted to study international relations, foreign policy,
Yeah.
yada, yada, right?
Mhm.
And there is a top one school in the US for it. It's called Georgetown University. It's in Washington, D.C. It's supposed to be a super great school. And I applied early decision. I did everything that I possibly could. I worked super hard all the way through high school to make sure that I would have a good application. And I was not even waitlisted, I think. I was flat out rejected. And as somebody who, at least up until that point, right, considered himself to be very academically successful and
Yeah.
very academically oriented, it
Mm,
was a bit of a shocker. Did not take it well. I was very
mm,
frustrated and upset. I only really recently managed to kind of let go of that frustration. And then I ended up going to American University, which is also in DC and is also a good school for international relations, though it's not the top one. And they have this partnership with Ritsumeikan University, is what it's called, in Kyoto, Japan, which is where I am now.
Toby, tell me, when you say now that you want to be a diplomat, when was this actually, when did it actually started? When was in school? Why did you choose? There are so many other things to do. Did you have someone who is your idol or someone whom you used to look up to? How did this international relation interest in this subject as well as diplomacy, where did it start from?
I made a conscious decision that I wanted to be a diplomat, and I made that decision when I was 14 or 15 years old. It was in my first year, my freshman year of high school. And I made that decision because I had sat down in class and we were doing some like career thinking thing. I don't remember the exact specifics of it, but the idea was think about what you want to do with yourself. I thought, well, I want to be a competitive worker. I
Okay.
am good at a few things. The thing that I am head and shoulders above other people good at is Japanese. Um,
Okay.
because of like all of that stuff I talked about previously with like the
Mm.
exchanges, I,
Yeah.
um, I speak the language very well.
Mm.
And I said I wanted to use Japanese. And the first thing I thought of was, okay, well, I can be a translator, right?
Yeah.
Um, but, and that was my plan for a little while. But I started thinking, if I'm a translator, then what I'm doing is I'm expanding the audience, which is really cool. And I'm going to be bringing, work from one place to another, which is cool. But it's not going to be my words, right? Like, for example, if I'm doing a book, those aren't my words that I'm translating. And I got to thinking and I was like, I kind of want to do things with my words and I want to share my thoughts and I want to connect people. And it was also coinciding with times where I was starting to enjoy kind of socializing and meeting people and getting to know them and a lot more. And all of that kind of culminated into, okay, diplomacy checks all of these boxes. I get to use something I'm good at. I get to work with people. I get to impact the world, hopefully, anyway, right? If I'm good enough at it. And I can really, really make wide scale positive change. That's another thing that I really wanted out of my career. And
That's
that I, good.
Yeah, that's interesting because when you were speaking about the translator bit, I think everyone goes through person who loves to travel and who is looking at the world leaders meeting, and you see that other person sitting and talking, translating things. I
Mhm.
used to find him so cool. I said he is talking, he is sitting between two world leaders and translating. He's the most important person. I can understand what you feel like. Okay, I will be a translator for some time, yes, but now you are in the right field. Tell me about, Japanese philosophy, Japanese culture has been all over. People will write about it, people will quote Japanese philosophy for whichever
Mhm.
leadership workshops you go, you will have somebody speaking about ikigai, somebody speaking about so many kaizen. So we have all brought upon that as an outsider. So you being in the thick of things, you are half Japanese, half American. So I would definitely ask you, what do you think works for Japan, and what is it actually on the field? Do the people follow this, the philosophies which the world over goes gaga over, and how are the mental state of people there, are especially also about youth? Take me through those things, in workplace, college, in day-to-day life. How the generally people are? I have gone there as a tourist, so I will only
Mhm.
see that good things. So tell me about in detail.
Yeah, great questions. Very broad. Where do I start? I think to start off with, like, to what extent Japanese people follow the philosophies that people associate with Japanese culture. I think there are some that they do and some that they might not quite so much.
Yeah.
Um, you definitely see things like humility being really big. Um, and Japanese students in particular, I think I've noticed that they struggle to promote themselves, like argue that, hey, I'm a good person. Like I can do these things. I have these skills. You should, and that's really relevant when you're applying for jobs, right? And you're being interviewed. Um, you need to be able to say, yes, but it's this and this. So please hire me, right? Uh, and I've noticed that Japanese people tend to struggle with that. It's a skill just like anything else, and because it's so
Yeah.
culturally discouraged, it's an
Mm.
underdeveloped skill in a lot of them. So that's one thing that I think they do, just maybe a little bit too much. They do the humility thing maybe a little bit too much, and
Okay.
it starts to negatively impact some of them. I think another one is Japanese people are very, 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 very aware of their surroundings in
Mm.
like a social sense, at least.
Mm.
There's this big idea of maintaining like the social peace, right? You're not
Mm.
supposed to mirasu the wa, is what they say. Um,
What is it you said just now?
and you're not supposed to wa o midasu. Sorry, I said it in like Japanglish,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
a
yeah.
mix of the two language.
Please
But
go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, um, it just means that you're not supposed to cause issues, at least in the public front, right? If there are issues happening, you're supposed to keep them in the back rooms. Like nobody's supposed to know about them. Um,
Okay. Mm.
there's also a big culture of conformity where Japanese people don't want to stick out,
Mm.
and in some cases that can be a good thing. It's I don't know, sometimes it's a neutral thing. It's a cultural thing, right?
Mm.
That's why a big reason why a lot of schools here still have school uniforms, for example, and school rules against, for example, dyeing your hair. You wouldn't be able to have bleach hair like me,
Yeah.
if you were a
That.
Japanese high
Yeah.
schooler,
Yeah.
right? And people have their opinions about that, right? Some people think, oh, it's good that people know that they're in a community and there are rules
Mm.
and they learn how to follow them. And I
Mm.
think there are people with that view. There's also people that who say that stifles their individuality. It makes it difficult for them to express themselves. Um, and that's just like a personal view thing.
Yeah. If I have to ask specifically about two things, about how they look at how they take care of the environment, and especially also about the food, the culture of what they eat. Do they are they also eating good, healthy food, which are good, mm, traditional Japanese food, or they become like other young people are all having burgers and pizzas and not looking at their health? How is that food thing? This is very, speaking from Indian or Asian perspective, the inherent culture of food was so healthy, but now that we have got, this is one thing which we have lost in globalization, is our own food culture, which was so good and inherently good and healthy for us. So that one topic, and the second is how do they live sustainably? So just talk about this and take me through this too.
Yeah, those are good questions. I'm going to start with the food. There's definitely been a influx of foreign food in Japan. It's funny, they've got a name for it. They call it yoshoku as opposed to
Yeah.
washoku, which is Japanese food. Um, and but a lot of it has is not necessarily like of globalization in recent terms, like curry rice, for example, is like a very, very it's a Japanese staple.
Mm.
And it comes from, I think, like the later 20th century, being imported into
Yeah, it's been
Japan.
happening for a long time now. But
Right.
do
Yeah,
they
yeah. It's a
still
gradual progress for sure.
for celebrity occasion for celebrations, festivals, do they still have those original authentic Japanese food?
Yeah, typically they do, especially for like, the Japanese holidays. On New Year's, they have food called osechi. It's just a bunch of assorted different New Year's foods with various meanings assigned to them. It's funny though, like for other like foreign um, holidays, they'll have different foods. So for Christmas, it's very common in Japan to have KFC specifically,
Oh,
fried chicken.
yeah, I know. I've read about this. Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
right,
yeah.
right. Which I think is like a really funny cultural thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, for example, but I would say that Japanese people tend to stick to at least relatively Japanese food.
Hmm.
And even if they eat like food that's a product of globalization, it's usually kind of Japanified, and the flavor profile is very different. The contents can be different sometimes. I would say that Japanese people tend to take more care of their health
Hmm.
than people from my
Hmm.
home country, anyway.
Hmm. Hmm. And how
And
about
then,
living? Yeah. Hmm.
yeah, about living sustainably. If there's one thing that Japanese people love, they love plastic, and like it's crazy. A lot of like snacks will come individually wrapped in plastic inside of a
Yeah.
bigger plastic bag. They just use a lot of plastic is something that I've noticed and something that I have noticed for a long time. But kind of on the flip side of that, Japanese people have, well, not even Japanese people, Japan as a country has a system of dividing up its trash for recycling, and Japanese people are typically pretty good about that. Obviously, not everybody,
That's nice.
but
Yeah.
right. And
Mhm.
then a big portion of it is you divide your plastic from your burnable trash, and the
Mm,
plastics are recycled. And I
mm.
don't have any numbers or statistics on
That's okay.
how that impacts
Mm, mm,
sustainability, but
mm,
I imagine it has at least some effect.
mm. Tommy, tell me about your biggest strength since you are going to become in future a diplomat. So, what you think is your biggest strength, and what is that one thing, one limitation you want to overcome?
Yeah. So I would say that my biggest strength is adaptability and that I'm a quick learner. I can be put in completely brand new, unfamiliar situations, and it does take me a second, right? I'm still human, but I
Mm,
can adapt to that different
mm.
situation and behave accordingly, I think, faster,
Fantastic.
in my experience, faster than a lot of other people can. And that served
Mm,
me a lot and it served me very well. I think the other something that I would like to work on and something that I need to get better at is being a little bit more socially outgoing, especially when I don't have any sense of familiarity in a situation. I so even though I've spent a lot of time alone in unfamiliar situations in the past
yeah.
through like exchange stuff,
Mm,
have been lucky in every time. There have been people who were kind to reach out to me first.
mm,
Like there are people who were willing to talk to me, who were willing
mm,
to say, "Hey, what's your name?" and then strike up a conversation. And I typically am not the person to do that. And
mm.
that's somewhere that I really want to grow. I've had experiences here where Japanese people, they tend to conform. They don't want to take that first step quite as much as
Okay.
people do in the States.
Mm, right.
And I've I've missed out on things because I wasn't willing to take that step myself. And
Mm,
especially because I want to be a diplomat where not passing opportunities like that up to make connections that will last a while is going to be really
mm.
important. I That's something that I want and need to continue to work on, and that's like a big goal of mine for this year.
Oh, absolutely. But you are so young right now. You have realized that even now, at this age, we feel very intimidated or sometimes, but we have overcome
Hmm.
this. And I think you have identified your shortcoming, which is amazing. People don't even know, like, okay, I want to push the boundary and I just overcome that. That's amazing that you
Hmm.
realize it and you're working towards it. Fantastic. Tommy,
Uh,
if you have to interview, um historical figure going back in history and interview somebody from history, who would that be and why?
So, the person who I would choose right now in this moment, anyway, maybe my answer would be different next week, but I would choose right now. His name is Tokugawa Ieyasu. He's a Japanese guy. I'm keeping in line with my appreciation of Japanese culture and history. He was the very first person to truly 100% unite all of Japan. In the he His rise to power and his unification of Japan marked the beginning of the Edo period, which maybe you've heard about. It's
Yeah.
the period of very, very strong cultural development in Japan. It was
Mm,
accompanied by a bunch of really interesting governmental policies, which I would be curious to hear his take on. I think some of them
mm,
happened after his lifetime and definitely after his claim to power. Um, for example, like it's called the Sakoku. It's Japan's complete exclusion of like foreign influence. They like closed the country,
mm.
except for like two different harbors. But it was like a really big deal for the country, and
Okay.
it allowed them to kind of concentrate their culture. And I would be
Mm,
curious on his thoughts on that. Um,
mm.
I'd also be curious
Right.
about what he'd have to say about the current global makeup and geopolitics. What he'd say about um,
Mm,
cooperation and how he might
mm.
be able to see, not necessarily from a conqueror's point of view, definitely not, but from somebody who ran a relatively successful government.
Right. I have to look him up to know more about. Thanks for bringing somebody new, like somebody whom I have no idea who he is. So
Mhm.
that is interesting. I have to read about him. Thank you for this answer. Uh, Tommy, tell me, you are studying international relationships, conflict resolution, and you see yourself in that career ahead. So right now, at this when you are halfway through your course, right, you said, so do you think you are in the right place, and what is it that you wish to add more to become you want to study further, or once you finish this education you want to start looking for a job? How does this progression from after the college to the journey of diplomat, what are the things, your exams which you have to pass, or what you have to do? Do you have to further line up some other exams or studies? What kind of things will take you to that level where you want to reach after your college?
Yeah. So there's that test, right? And then the interviews. And it's very, very rare for the State Department to take people straight out of undergrad, is something that I've heard. And it's not impossible, but it's rather rare. So I am going to apply after finishing undergrad. Like I'm going to try, but I also have I'm like considering consulting for a little while. I'm considering going into the public sector, or sorry, the private sector, the other one.
Hmm.
I'm considering working for the government. I'd like to do something in foreign policy. I'd like to do something related to Japan. Maybe I'll come back to Japan for a little while.
Okay.
And I'd like to do something with youth if I do.
Hmm.
But yeah, I'm also thinking about going to grad school and getting a master's
Yeah.
as well. So I've got a bunch of different options. I don't necessarily have one chosen. It's going to depend on how things go during applications. But
Yeah. You are working with youth, and you want to bring youth to the mainstream, Japanese youth especially, and you are connecting youth from America to Japan and bringing them on the same platform, right? Because of the language also, they need to know English language. So all these things which are working with youth. Tell me one thing, what you see as the big challenge which the youth of Japan face now, then American youth. So what is it that they are looking at? They are are there challenges which they find they are not recognized by what they want to say? Are the people listening to them? What is that? I would say, what is that challenging thing which the youth find today struggling the most?
oh, I would say all of the above. Um,
Yeah.
Japanese pe- Japanese youth have it rough, my friend, because the country is not exactly working for their benefit right now.
Hmm.
Japan's got a very strong aging, a very large, sorry, aging population, and increasingly the youth are being expected to support them not just now,
Mm.
but like over the coming years, right? By paying
Yeah.
additional taxes, for example, to support pension programs. That's just one example. But I think if I were to say youth in Japan were facing one main struggle, I think it would probably be the fact that none of them, not none of them, but not enough of them are speaking up at all in the first place. It's not even a question necessarily about being heard or not, because I think not enough Japanese youth are speaking up in the first place. And
Mm.
there's definitely, and don't get me wrong, there's definitely an element of, oh, they're not going to listen to us anyway, so why bother?
Mm.
Um, so that does tie into like not being heard. But I
Mm.
think it's a lot to do with self confidence. I think it's a lot to do with lack of the ability to articulate oneself, lack of
Mm.
even to know what to think, right?
Mm.
Because those things aren't typically focused on very much in Japanese education, in my experience at least, and from what I know. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge that I would say Japanese youth face. And if I were to come back to Japan in the future, I would definitely want to work with Japanese youth to address one or multiple of those points, because I think that they are the biggest barriers to Japan's
Right.
youth and to
Perfect.
Japan's society
Mm.
overall.
Great. Tommy, now this is the part where you get to ask me a question. Role reversal. What is it that you want to ask me? As I have been asking you so many questions, go ahead and let me see what you have for me.
All right. So I actually prepared two questions to ask you, but I think I'm going to pick the harder one for me. What's really been on my mind recently with a lot of the stuff that's going on in the world around us, and there's a lot of people who aren't getting along. So that's an understatement, but right, they're not getting along. They're in conflict with each other. And that's, what's going on with like military conflicts, but it's also like person to person conflicts. Um, and I'm curious why it is that you think people can't get along. Why don't people try to understand each other?
Okay. Yeah.
Big question.
Yeah. It is a interesting question in a way because why people are not able to understand each other is they are not even looking into each other's eyes. How will they understand? They're not looking at the facial expression, they're not looking at the emotions. You can't understand if you are you're headed down and you are constantly looking at your mobile. How will you get the emotions of the people? They're not getting that, disconnected. So it starts from the family, it starts from the family, then it goes to the society, then the country, and then the world. So who are we blaming? People are not understanding each other at the very higher level. Are we understanding each other at the micro level, at the family level? How much time we are giving to look at each other's face? How much time we are looking at actually gadget free, not the TV is on, not the mobile, and listening? You just try and look into any cafe, go there. I do this very often. I just leave my phone and I observe people. It's so sad to see there are two people sitting, no connection. Even kids are on mobile, but to each their own. But don't blame the world that people are not getting connected, people are emotionless, disconnected. Try looking into your house and start from here. Like, these conversations are very important. So if you start from your house, start from your parents, start from your with your siblings, your children. So go from there till outside, inside to outside. Thank you so much, Tommy, for this wonderful, wonderful talk. And I think it's not been like a typical interview. It's about meeting of two different people from two different cultures and getting to know each other. It's been wonderful. If I have to ask you to end this conversation with your life philosophy in one line, what would that be?
My life philosophy in one line would be listen well, observe well, adapt, and take action.
Mm,
That's how it sums
wonderful.
up.
Adapt and take action. I think all the words made sense throughout this interview. Everything which you said, you have summed up so well. Thank you so much, Tommy. I think I look up to you as a future diplomat one day, and we'll have this conversation again, maybe 10 years down the line, and to see what you're doing. All the best for all your ventures, for your upcoming exams, for whatever you're doing, and keep connected. And yes, and once again, this was a most wonderful interview. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And same to you. I look forward to speaking with you again, and good luck with the
Yes,
podcast and everything else you're up to.
thank you. Thank you to the listeners. And I think there's a lot of takeaways from this interview. Do write in the comment section what you liked. And if you want to connect to Tommy and his work, I'll be putting in the description section about his work. Follow him, enjoy the conversation, and keep joining us every week so that this beautiful platform grows more and more and I can bring more people from across the globe. It's only because you listen I can do that. Please subscribe to my channel and give it a thumbs up. Thank you. Bye bye. Bye bye, Tommy.